For thousands of years, people have gazed up at the heavens and read messages in stars. From studying the skies, astrologers have predicted an endless list of world events, including natural disasters, stock market crashes, assassination attempts, and the birth of Jesus Christ. Astrologers have been prized by world leaders, from ancient Greek generals to 20th century American presidents, and epoch-making decisions around the world are still made according to the arrangement of the stars in the sky. But can the movements of the planets truly affect events on Earth? How can astrologers look at charts of the heavens and predict the outcome of a journey, marriage, a war? Is our future really written in the stars? In 18th century England, there were two men whose backgrounds could not have been more different. One was a humble ironmonger, the other King George III of England. Despite this, their lives were full of extraordinary parallels. They inherited their father's businesses in the same month, married on the same day, fathered the same number of boy and girl children, were ill at the same time, and suffered the same accidents. Even their deaths were separated by only a few hours. They weren't related by blood, but they were astrological twins, born at virtually the same time and only a few miles apart, and their horoscopes were identical. According to astrological belief, the similar pattern of their lives was entirely to be expected. Astrology, in some form, is familiar to everyone. Millions of people read their horoscope in the media each day, and even the most skeptical know their own zodiac sign. What they may not realize as they scan the newspaper columns is that they are the beneficiaries of the most far-reaching intellectual enterprise in human history. Known as the Queen of Sciences, astrology is our most ambitious attempt to combine science and philosophy into an overall explanation of destiny, and it's as old as recorded history. It began 5,000 years ago as people watched and noted the movement of the stars in the sky. Excited by these observations, they proposed a link between movements in the heavens and human lives on Earth. Since then, astrologers have maintained that there is a meaningful connection between planets and people, but they have never agreed on how or why. Astrology has stood the test of time. It's as popular now as it has ever been, and flourishes in every corner of the globe. Cambridge University historian Nick Campion has made an academic study of astrology's changing role.
Astrology is actually infinitely flexible. We just can't get away from the fact that it's one of the most accurate descriptions of character we have, and it can predict the future.
Robert Currey is a prominent astrologer whose London astrology shop attracts thousands of clients each year.
I think the reason for the success and popularity of astrology is because it is a truth. It is something that is fundamental. I feel that astrology comes from something higher. It's as if it's part of the universe. Sometimes when I was doing charts and consultation, I'd get a chill down my back, down my spine, because people would say things that were so uncannily true in accordance with the chart.
For most people, a horoscope means a brief impersonal prediction in a newspaper or on TV. Shelley von Strunkel is a consultant astrologer who also writes popular newspaper sun sign columns in Britain and America.
These are designed to give the individual a chance to think about their day to come. It's a bit like a weather report for a specific part of the country.
But these horoscopes refer solely to the signs of the zodiac, sometimes called sun signs. The zodiac is the name given to the band of constellations in the sky, through which the sun, moon, and planets appear to pass as they journey through the heavens. The Romans compared the movement of the planets through this starry backdrop to a chariot race. The sun, moon, and planets are the chariots, and the constellations are the racetrack. The zodiac is divided into 12 divisions, or signs. Everyone born during the 30 days it takes the sun to travel through one division is said to belong to that sign, and astrologers believe that they will share its characteristics and influences. Sun sign predictions are very generalized, but despite this, newspaper horoscope columns have a large following. Erin Sullivan, an astrological writer and teacher, has also written popular columns.
Sun sign astrology, as it appears in the newspapers, interests millions of people, which is often why some people buy a particular paper. Some people who write these columns are terribly successful. They're very, very good. They have an excellent vocabulary. They are able to work the symbolism quite nicely. You'll find that some of them are actually very good, and some of them are absolute drivel. It's just ridiculous.
A true horoscope is more than just a sun sign description. It's a personal chart describing the astrological influences relating solely to that individual. The chart is cast by an astrologer and is known as a natal chart.
This is a map of where the planets are at the time of your birth. And it is a unique map that relates to you in particular. From that information, an astrologer can then tell you about your potential, the type of person you are, the type of experiences you may have during your life, and how you could perhaps understand difficult areas in your personality.
Astrologers claim that a natal chart can reveal whether a person is outgoing, anxious, musical, technical, emotional, and it can indicate an individual's most likely professions. The chart is a snapshot of the heavens at the exact moment of birth. The pattern of the skies can change in as little as 4 minutes, so no one except those born within moments of each other in the same place could lay claim to the same horoscope. Astrological twins like George III and the Ironmonger are considered more likely to have similar lives than identical twins born a few crucial minutes apart. Many people don't know the exact time of their birth, but this doesn't prevent them from having a horoscope cast. Usually, astrologers cast a chart for sunrise on the birth date, but there is a longer process called rectification, whereby the astrologer works backwards from the events of a person's life to their most probable birth time. Anyone who knows their birthday can visit an astrologer to have their horoscope drawn.
It's not a lot different from going to seeing any other consultant, except first you've got to provide your birth date, place, and time. Normally, before the individual attends the appointment, the astrologer will have calculated a chart, a horoscope.
Natal charts can be drawn up for anything which has a birth date. Cities, even structures, can have charts. The Berlin Wall, for example, built in August 1960, had a horoscope which predicted a time of instability and change for November 1989, the date when this historic barrier fell. Nick Campion has even drawn charts for countries.
So what we do is take particular politically important moments for each country. For one country it may be a revolution, for another a coronation. So for the United States, we take July the 4th, 1776, which is when the wording of the Declaration of Independence was agreed, and this is when the United States celebrates its birthday.
Drawing charts for places, groups, or countries is known as mundane astrology. It's the most ancient form of astrology and the one most commonly used by world leaders in history. These horoscopes show the most auspicious time to begin important enterprises, whether it's making an important speech or declaring war. Astrologer Joan Quigley used mundane astrology to select the time for Ronald Reagan's second inauguration as President of the United States.
She chose 11:57 a.m. in a chart set for Washington, D.C. And it is a spectacular chart. The sun was in the sign of Aquarius, Ronald Reagan's sign, and Jupiter, the planet of growth, expansion, and opportunity, was next to the moon, which signals popularity. There could have been no better indication for a successful administration.
The role of Quigley in the White House was a highly secret one, but politically important dates in modern Malaysia and India are still decided by public astrological readings. A horoscope is based upon a map of the heavens. It's a very detailed map, and astrologers are grateful that computers have taken over the time-consuming task of physically drawing up the chart. Henry Weingarten is a financial astrologer who generates thousands of charts each year.
The role of the computer is similar to what it was to have students from many years ago. They're doing the routine calculations for you, but the actual analysis is done by a professional.
The map comes to life when a skilled astrologer begins to read it. Astrology is a technical subject, requiring considerable knowledge of the planetary influences revealed in the chart. Practice and experience are the key.
Your love life's not very satisfactory.
Astrologers do not claim that horoscopes categorically predict the future. They say that the stars don't compel, they only incline. So no horoscope would declare that an accident is going to happen, only that a particular moment is accident-prone. Astrologers aim to provide their clients with extra information, thus adding to choice, not restricting it. Many people find that having a horoscope read provokes thought and forces concentration on the issues. It helps them with decision-making. How can analyzing a map of the heavens affect the personalities and actions of people on Earth? The solution lies in astrologers' belief in the nature of planetary influence, a belief that began 5,000 years ago. Around 3000 BC, the foundations of astrology were laid among the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia, now Iraq. Here, in a region called Babylonia, the first astrologers stood on their 300-foot-high ziggurats and gazed at the stars. They noticed how the most obvious heavenly bodies, the planets, seemed to follow strangely erratic paths, sometimes passing each other at great speed, sometimes slowing down, and even going backwards. These ancient observers worked out what 20th century scientists using space probes and telescopes have confirmed, that the planets have regular orbits and that they vary in position, brightness, and speed as they follow their paths. The Babylonians also began to record a connection between these patterns and events on Earth.
The Mesopotamian philosophy, which continued well into classical Greece and Rome and into Renaissance Europe, was that the whole world was alive. And by the whole world, they meant the universe, the stars, as well as the Earth. And they continually believed that nature was talking to them. And behind nature were the forces which they call the gods and goddesses.
For the Babylonians, the forces of nature extended into space, which they saw as inseparable from earthly life. These first astrologers saw the planets as embodying the powerful yet capricious gods and goddesses, each planet resembling in appearance and movement the character of its god. The Babylonians, and later the Greeks and Romans, believed that these planets, all different, exerted their influences upon life on Earth, and that the closer each planet locked in its orbit came to the Earth, the more strongly people on Earth were affected by it. This ancient idea of the planets as forces with distinctive personalities and effects is still the cornerstone of astrological belief and the basis on which horoscopes are interpreted. The core function of a horoscope is to record the positions of the planets so that their influences can be assessed. This chart, the horoscope of John F. Kennedy, is recorded in a shorthand developed by astrologers through the centuries. Although this shorthand has changed little over the years, the mechanics of drawing the chart have been transformed by computers. But astrologers still learn to calculate and draw charts in the traditional way, using astrological tables.
If we wanted to calculate the horoscope for President Kennedy, we would first of all need to look at his time, date and place of birth. Now, he was born at 17 minutes past 3 in the afternoon in Brookline, Massachusetts on the 29th of May 1917. Our first simple calculation is to work out what the time was in London, which we would call Greenwich Mean Time. And the reason is quite simple. It's that all the planetary tables are calculated for London. Now, with that information, we can then go to the table of houses and make one slight further adjustment and then look up his rising sign, which happened to be Libra. The rising sign is a sign rising over the eastern horizon when you were born. According to all astrological traditions, the rising sign or ascendant is as important in your horoscope and character as the sun sign. So, taking President Kennedy's chart, his rising sign is Libra, we mark that carefully on the left-hand side, and then we fill in the rest of the signs of the zodiac around the outside, through right round the circle, round back to Virgo.
The chart has a further set of divisions. These are the houses. They refer to practical areas of human life, such as family, money, travel, and work.
The next stage is to work out where the planets were at the time of birth. Now, we would go for this information to a book called An Ephemeris, and this will list the positions of the planets for every day of the year, and you can buy a volume which lists them for 100 years if you wish. Taking President Kennedy's chart, for example, he was born with the sun in Gemini and the moon in Virgo. Now, the planetary positions in the Ephemeris are going to be given to the nearest degree, very precisely. So we're not just looking at the sign the planet is in, but also the precise degree of the sign. And then we go around and do the same with the other 8 planets.
Once the planets have been recorded on the chart, interpretation can begin. The astrologer must know the influences identified with each planet. In Kennedy's chart, the most significant planets are Jupiter, the planet of leadership and success, Mercury, the planet of the mind and communication, Mars, the planet of war, Venus, the planet of love, and Pluto, planet of death and endings. The relationship of planets to each other can be as important as their individual effect. One powerful grouping is a key feature of Kennedy's chart.
It's interesting to see that he had a very, very powerful conjunction of planets in Taurus. Now, a conjunction means that planets are linked very tightly within 8 degrees in a sign. And he had Jupiter, which is a planet of optimism and growth, Mercury, which is the planet which ruled his mental processes, his ideas, and Mars, which is a planet of anger and aggression, and in politics indicates war. Now, Taurus is a sign which is very persistent and very stubborn and achieves its aims without deviation. It will find a course and stick to it. I think that this is the particular alignment which indicates his success in standing up to the Soviet Union in Berlin and in Cuba. And of course, looking at the chart very literally, Mars in ancient times ruled arrows and spears, and of course in modern terms that's missiles.
The angles between planets in a chart, or aspects in astrological terms, are also important.
The next stage of interpreting the planets is to look at the planetary aspects. Now, the aspects are precise distances between planets. Some of them are difficult and others are easy. Now, if we look at Kennedy's chart, then the moon was making 2 difficult aspects, one to Venus and one to the sun. The moon square to Venus is very difficult emotionally, and this would represent the deep internal pull that he felt between his love for Jackie on the one hand and his high regard for her as a wife and mother of his children, and his desire to explore relationships with other women, with Marilyn Monroe and other more alluring characters. And the same would have happened between the moon and the sun, which often represents divorce or the breakup of a marriage. So perhaps had Kennedy lived, we would have seen his relationship with Jackie Kennedy running into the public trouble that we already know it was in privately. If we look at Pluto in Kennedy's chart, then Pluto was in ancient mythology the god of the underworld. In modern astrology, it's a planet which represents endings, whole phases of life coming to an end. Now, it's intriguing to note that when Kennedy was born, Pluto was exactly overhead at Dallas. So that is how to calculate and interpret a chart. Now, of course, these days, any computer can do the calculation, but there's nothing to replace the astrologer's skill in actually interpreting a chart and bringing it to life.
Modern astrologers often help clients in their personal lives, but predicting events has always been part of astrology. The most famous astrologers have foretold major events, even the beginnings of new eras. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a small group of Persian astrologers observed an unusual conjunction in the heavens. They discovered that this had been predicted by the astrologer-philosopher Zoroaster, and that it would herald the birth of a new king. The astrologers set off on a long journey, working out the time and place of the new king's birth from their astrological observations. But when they reached the spot, they found only a baby lying in a stable. The astrologers were the Magi, and the baby was Jesus. Astronomer Dr. Percy Seymour has studied the skies as they were at the time of the birth of Christ in order to discover what led the Magi to their historic conclusion. He found a rare association between the planet Jupiter, traditionally associated with kings, and Saturn, associated with the Jewish people.
These two planets actually did a dance in the sky and came together 3 times in 1 year. And that's called a triple conjunction. But there was something even more significant about this triple conjunction. It occurred in the constellation of Pisces. And Pisces was associated with the area around Bethlehem. And a triple conjunction in Pisces only takes place once every 900 years. And I think what they did was they said that a king of Jewish origin was about to be born in Bethlehem. So they went in search of this king. They might even have made use of the census that was going on to find out which baby was born at that right time. And then they told his mother that he was born to be king of the Jews.
When the child of a royal lineage was due to be born, there was only one person more anxious than the expectant father, the court astrologer. In a Macedonian palace in 356 BC, the court was expecting the new child of the king, Philip II, and Olympias, Philip's wife, had gone into labor. The astrologer pleaded with Olympias to try to delay the birth as long as possible. If she could do so, her child would have an extraordinary horoscope and would become one of the greatest leaders the world had ever known. Somehow, Olympias managed to do as the astrologer asked, and eventually her son was born into his epoch-making horoscope. Olympias had given birth to Alexander the Great. Things don't always turn out this way. Robert Currey was offered a choice of birth dates for his daughter.
We spent ages looking at it. We worked it out, and it was a tremendous responsibility. And we picked this new moon in Pisces, which we thought was going to be the most wonderful chart, and it fitted in with our charts, and we had it all planned. So my wife then went into hospital, and we waited for the doctor to come round to help with induction. And nothing happened. There'd actually been a crisis on that morning. And it was only in the afternoon that she actually was born. And the end result was that the moon had changed signs. The horoscope was completely different. But In fact, it's been the most wonderful thing. And I think the lesson for me is that you should just let fate take its course.
The fortunes of astrology waxed and waned during the Middle Ages, but by the 16th century, astrology in Europe had become highly refined, well regarded, and an essential qualification for any educated person. Astrology was a mainstream academic subject taught in universities alongside mathematics, medicine, and astronomy, and was used by doctors, scientists, and high-ranking intellectuals.
One of the most famous astrologers of all time was John Dee, who was a personal astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I of England. So we could say that he was responsible for some of the most important decisions taken in one of the most important reigns in English history.
Dee's work included acting as a spy for Elizabeth. But astrology, not foreign intelligence, was the cornerstone of his instructions to his queen. He chose propitious dates for all important events. One of his greatest successes came in 1588, when he advised Elizabeth on the timing of England's victorious confrontation with the Armada, the invading naval force of Spain.
The way he would have worked would be to have looked at Mars, which was England's planetary ruler, and if that was stronger than Jupiter, which was Spain's planetary ruler, he would have said the Armada would fail, as it did. And he would have looked at other factors such as Mercury, which rules the winds, and he would have looked at Mercury and said, well, the Armada might be blown off course, as it was.
This was the heyday of astrology. In the 1600s, there were more than 200 well-known astrologers working in London. People went to an astrologer when they were ill, when they had suffered a loss or reversal of fortune, or when they were considering marriage or business ventures. The first ever weekly horoscope dates from this time. It was called The Starry Messenger and was written by William Lilly, who was famous for predicting the Great Plague and the Great Fire of London. William Lilly practiced horary astrology, an ancient method which is designed to answer specific questions, such as whether a relationship will result in marriage or even the whereabouts of a lost ring. In the 20th century, we have come full circle, back to finding personal astrologers next to political leaders and ordinary people seeking advice from newspaper horoscopes or their local astrologer. They have decisions to make, and they use horoscopes to help them. During the Second World War, Hitler secretly employed an astrologer, Karl Kraft. The Allies discovered this and decided to employ one too. They hoped that their astrologer would come to the same conclusions as Kraft. When Kraft compared the charts of Rommel and Montgomery just before the North African campaign, he could see that Britain was certain to be the winner. Hitler's response was to put Kraft in jail and carry on with the ill-fated campaign. President Reagan was more inclined to follow the advice of his astrologer, Joan Quigley. Quigley's first success was to predict the attempt on Reagan's life. And thereafter, she was involved in all the major and many of the minor decisions of the presidency.
When Quigley was doing her work, her calculations would be as precise as selecting the time that the president's aircraft, Air Force One, would leave on a trip for a summit conference, so that a message would go from Mrs. Quigley to Mrs. Reagan to the president's office that the president's plane should take off at a specific hour for a summit meeting. And it did.
In the winter of 86 to 87, Quigley was worried about the movements of Uranus and Saturn. She felt that they indicated a danger of assassination. For 4 months, Reagan stayed inside the White House, emerging only once to give the State of the Union address. Every event in the president's life was timed by the casting of horoscopes. But how did horoscopes help Reagan with the bigger issues of the presidency?
Joan Quigley is credited as being one of the people who told Ronald Reagan that he could do business with the Soviet Union. Now, for the first part of his presidency, Reagan had been sounding off against the evil empire, and there'd been this amazing arms build-up. And then Joan comes along and looks at Gorbachev's horoscope and says to Reagan, look, this is a man that we can do business with.
Ronald Reagan used astrology to help him make decisions which altered world history. But millions of ordinary people use astrology in their everyday life. They use it for all kinds of purposes. Astrology claims to give insight, and there is no area of life where insight, and thus astrology, cannot be employed. Astrology offers help in everything, from finding a lost purse to timing a journey. Horoscopes assist people with problems in their personal lives. Astrologers claim that a natal chart can help you know yourself and thus be more equipped to meet challenges. A horoscope is the most egocentric document imaginable, a map of the universe with the individual at its center. For many people, including princesses, this chart is the place where revelations about past, present, and future are to be found.
Diana had used astrology quite consistently and, as far as we can gather, quite successfully. Now, she was born with the sun in Cancer, which is responsible for the caring, compassionate, emotional side of her character, but also for that part of her which is so shy and withdrawn.
Astrologers find Princess Diana's chart explains a great deal about her personality.
A chart's a picture of what one experienced in childhood, and the moon opposite Uranus indicates a tumultuous childhood. And indeed, her mother did leave suddenly when she was a young child, and she acquired a new and not altogether popular stepmother shortly after. This position of the moon and Uranus in her chart marks then the tendency as an adult to react suddenly as well when she's hit with conflict, as we've seen to be the case.
In a consultation, an astrologer would use these insights to give advice about the future.
I think another way in which astrology was very important to Diana was in taking aspects of her chart which were difficult. For example, I'm thinking of her moon in Aquarius squared to Venus, which is very, very difficult emotionally and been causing her great tension. And her astrologers showed her how this could be used positively because it's a very, very idealistic alignment. And that's when she started going to meet Mother Teresa and taking up radical charities such as AIDS and shaking hands with AIDS victims.
Princess Diana's chart shows Saturn, the planet of duty and responsibility, challenged by Neptune, which represents disillusionment and disintegration. And her Venus, the planet of love and romance, is opposed by Pluto, the planet of hidden things, opposition, and endings.
Buckingham Palace would have done well to have looked at Diana's horoscope. Had they done so, they would have seen somebody who just couldn't be contained in a tight, constricting atmosphere, who just couldn't obey the rules. And I think had they done so, they could have used the situation of the breakup of the marriage just so much more positively.
But could a comparison of the prince and princess's charts have been the most useful way of avoiding a potentially disastrous marriage? Few astrologers would claim that charts can say whether two people will be happy together, but they do think that horoscopes can reveal potential problems. Prince Charles's chart shows his Venus next to Neptune in a position which indicates idealization of women, particularly his mother. A definite problem for any wife to contend with. And a look at Princess Margaret's chart reveals an unhappy outcome for romance. It shows Venus, standing for love, opposed by Saturn, the planet of duty, foreshadowing the crisis in which she gave up the love of her life, a divorcee, to avoid a damaging scandal. Astrology is often used when people are thinking of marriage. Astrologers find that it's one of the most popular topics in their consultations. The questions are often about the chances of success in specific relationships. Astrologers such as Eugenie Di Serio in New York offer help in this area.
In terms of relationships, astrology can really be an X-ray into a person's nature and a partner's nature. Of course, a lot of people have problems, and they want to say, well, this is my birthday and this is my partner's and our relationship is in shambles. Do you think there's a way that we can find an answer to it? And we look, and usually the astrological signs in the chart will show if there's conflict or things people have to work around. We'll give them that advice.
To help people avoid these kinds of difficulties, Eugenie operates an astrological dating service which arranges astrologically compatible introductions on the internet. Some people go to astrologers for medical advice, usually alongside conventional treatment. Medicine and astrology have been linked for thousands of years. Each part of the body is represented by a subdivision of the zodiac, and horoscopes are said to reveal potential health problems. Medicine isn't the only area where astrology claims some success. Astro-economists are a new breed of financial advisors who use this ancient art to help them play the stock markets. Some investment houses use astrological information as well as the more conventional sort of market predictors. Henry Weingarten has many successes to his credit.
We have a proven track record. I called the Tokyo market crash 2.5 years in advance to within 2 days. In Wall Street itself, people there are only interested, does it work? How often does it work? How reliable is it? And how much money can I make from it?
These are not straightforward predictions. Each decision is based on information from dozens, sometimes hundreds of charts, which are interpreted and collated by the astrologer.
I first decide where in the world I want to invest, looking at the horoscope of a given country and the horoscope of a given currency. Then I tend to look at the horoscope of the stock market or bourse involved, the sectors that we're interested in investing, and then finally the stock itself. Many market surprises, not all of them, are chartable by astrology, such as the US-Mideast war, which is something we were anticipating.
Business horoscopes seem to work in the same way as personal ones. They outline the influences, possibilities, and probable outcomes, and guide rather than dictate a decision. For those who use astrology this way, its validity is not in doubt. Others are less convinced. Scientists have difficulty accepting a system whose workings seem to have no plausible explanation. But astrologers have something new to offer the cynics: statistical evidence. The continued popular appeal of astrology is a puzzle to many 20th century scientists who regard it as a lingering superstition. In the 1950s, Michel Gauquelin, a French scientist and statistician, irritated by what he thought were astrology's bogus claims, set out to refute a statistical study in which the astrological writer Léon Lasson had connected horoscopes with choice of career. To his surprise, his results confirmed Lasson's original conclusions. He repeated the studies and found even more significant results.
He turned up a very interesting result, looking at men who had excelled themselves in the medical profession, medical scientists and physicians who had excelled, won prizes, made discoveries, and he found out that these men, and they were mainly men at that time, they were mainly born when Saturn or Mars had reached its highest point in the sky.
Gauquelin also found that what became known as the Mars effect was strongest among world-class athletes, and that writers were significantly more likely to have had the moon rising in their charts. The striking thing for students of astrology is that these findings supported traditional beliefs about planetary influences.
Gauquelin's findings actually provides an underpinning of a belief from the ancient world that kings are born with Jupiter just rising or reaching its highest point. And this is why Jupiter became associated with kings and became the planet of kings.
Although Gauquelin's work was scientifically rigorous, scientific journals were reluctant to publish it. Gauquelin went on, however, to make another statistical discovery. Some aspects of horoscopes are hereditary. This was not true of zodiac signs, which showed no special connection, but it did apply to planetary influences.
And he was able to show that if Mars was rising, whether either the mother or father was born, then the child was also likely to be born with Mars rising.
This evidence, although statistically valid, fails to impress most scientists. Parapsychologist Susan Blackmore needs more convincing.
Almost all astrologers will claim that there is a relationship between the time and place you were born and your personality. So you can do, for example, my favorite sort of experiments are this sort. You might take, say, a dozen people and give an astrologer all the information he or she wants about those 12 people, and also give the 12 birth times and dates as accurate as they want them, and see whether the astrologer can match up those people, all the information, with those dates. Many experiments of that kind have been done, and they can't.
A similar piece of research showed that personality, as revealed in psychological tests, corresponded more closely with sun signs than with full natal horoscopes.
I think the reason is that we all know our zodiac signs. In other words, those people in that experiment get that correlation because they, if you like, are turning themselves into whatever they think they should be according to what their sign is.
Some scientists accept that astrologers are perceived as accurate by their clients. Psychologists, in particular, have been interested in explaining these successes. Carl Jung believed that there was a link between planets and earthly events, but that neither caused the other. They were both part of an overall synchronized pattern. Bob Breyer has a different theory as to how astrologers get results.
It has nothing to do with the stars. It's something else. And I think that something else is probably extrasensory perception, ESP. If astrology really worked the way many astrologers claim it does, that there's a direct correlation between the position of the heavens at the time of your birth and your subsequent actions, then the best astrologer would be a computer. But I think most astrologers feel that you can't do it just with a computer. There has to be an interpretation. And I think the interpretation is where ESP comes in.
Many psychologists maintain that good astrologers, those who impress clients with the accuracy of their personality analysis and can pinpoint problem areas, achieve the result with a combination of skills. They may, for example, be excellent at picking up unconscious signals from their clients, or may simply be good at telling clients what they want to hear.
I think the real power of astrology comes from people's desire to see themselves in the descriptions they read. So, for example, if I said to you, well, on the outside you appear really confident and relaxed, but underneath you're actually more worried than you seem. Now, that's true. Almost everybody will say that's true of them, but not true of other people, because you don't realize everybody else is like that too. You can very easily come to believe that astrology has far more validity than in fact it does.
But astrologers are equally convinced that a horoscope is valid in its own right. Their position is that good astrologers succeed because they are experienced at reading charts.
I was asked to do a chart as a gift for a gentleman, someone I'd never met, and given the birth time, date, and place. And I did a tape for him and sent it off in the post and really thought nothing more about it until I got a phone call from his wife. She said my tape had helped her understand her husband better than she ever had before.
Percy Seymour is one of the few scientists to develop a theory in the areas where real evidence does exist. He has sought an explanation for the connection which Gauquelin demonstrated between the position of planets and the lives of individuals. Seymour's theory is that planetary influence operates through a form of magnetism to which humans are sensitive. The mechanism is unclear, but we already know that the sun and the moon exert an influence on Earth. The full moon, for example, has long been associated with changes in human behavior, and the moon's phases are precisely linked to the ebb and flow of the tides. Animals certainly seem capable of responding to the moon's effect. Oysters, for example, open and close at irregular times each day. It was thought that this was a response to the rise and fall of the tides, but biologists discovered that even in still tanks in the dark, the oysters maintained their tidal lunar rhythm. And when oysters are transported 1,000 miles from the coast, they change their rhythm to the moon cycle of their new home. Somehow, in their darkened tank, they can detect and respond to the phases of the moon. Activity on the surface of the sun more directly influences our atmosphere. Solar flares, magnetic storms on the sun, are associated with increased interference to radio transmissions and disruptions in human behavior. Road accidents increase up to 4 times during and just after these disturbances. Scientists accept that animals and humans can detect signals from close and powerful neighbors, such as the sun or moon. But what about the planets, which are much, much further away from Earth? Percy Seymour has a theory as to how the effects of even distant planets may be registered here.
We all know that the sun and the moon have an effect on our Earth. How can the planets enter this scenario? How can they play a part, since they are so far away from us? And their distances makes their effect on us so very, very weak. I think this is where the sun comes into it. The sun can tune in to the weak tidal forces of the planets. And these weak tidal forces can be amplified by the sun's magnetic field so that the sun can disrupt in the form of violent storms. This affects the magnetic field of Earth. And since the magnetic field of the Earth is known to affect a wide variety of organisms, it can have an effect on human beings as well.
Seymour's idea is that the nervous systems of animals and humans act like aerials to detect the vibrations of the Earth's field, a complex symphony played by the constantly moving solar system. The first signals are etched onto our blank nervous systems even before we are born.
I think that over the entire 9 months, when the fetus is in the womb, its developing aerial system, which is its nervous system, is picking up tunes, melodies, magnetic music of the solar system. Once the fetus is born, most of its information will come via its 5 senses. But it might well be that in later life, the individual picks up the themes and melodies of the symphony that it heard while it was in the womb. It will be predisposed, this individual, to behave in a certain way.
The debate continues. But while scientists argue, astrologers are more popular than for the last 300 years. We still don't know what, if any, scientific basis exists for astrology. But for centuries, the same message has emerged over and over again. The planets are part of the same system as Earth, and somehow their influence is felt in human lives. For the thousands of astrologers who help their clients to focus upon their lives and problems, the stars are more than a benevolent presence in the night sky. They are the guardians of our strengths and weaknesses, our desires and ambitions. They are our destiny. For centuries, the tarot cards have tumbled through history, a tantalizing blend of mystery and beauty. Packed with potent images and ancient symbols, these cards have predicted the rise and fall of kings and empires. Linked to the most ancient mystical systems, the tarot cards' origins are as mysterious as the source of their powers. How can a pack of cards probe the past and unlock the secrets of the future? And how do tarot readers use the extraordinary images on the cards to unravel our deepest, darkest concerns? The tarot is more than a set of beautiful cards. It's a system of divination, a way to reveal the unknown. Penetrating mystery and deception, it answers questions about the past and the present, and hints at what is to come. Millions of people have discovered for themselves the uncanny power of the tarot. Among them was Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, general to the Emperor Napoleon. France, January 1804. Bernadotte arrived at the house of celebrated tarot reader Mademoiselle Lenormand. He had heard of her success in using cards to foretell the future and wanted to test their power for himself. Pretending to be a businessman, Bernadotte asked Lenormand to predict the outcome of a fictitious commercial venture. As she did with all her clients, she told him to shuffle the cards and concentrate on the question he was asking. She then focused her mind and spread out the cards. The first one she turned over was the Knight of Swords. She told Bernadotte that he was no businessman, but a high-ranking military officer. The cards had seen through his disguise. "You are not only of high rank," she told him, "you are connected to one who will be made emperor." The third card was the King of Swords, and you yourself will one day be a great king. The last card was death. If the cards were accurate, then Napoleon would become Emperor of France. But if Bernadotte were to become king, would he have to overthrow Napoleon? Later the same year, Napoleon indeed became Emperor of France. In 1818, 3 years after Napoleon's downfall, Bernadotte was crowned king, not of France, but of Sweden. The tarot continues to enlighten those who use it. In the hands of a skilled reader like Patty McLean, the tarot can illuminate every facet of life.
The tarot is a wonderful philosophical system that can get into all the nuances of your positive and negative energies in terms of how you're conducting your life, and it can show you what you're doing wrong and where you need to give some thought to making correction in your pattern.
Life is often likened to a journey in which obstacles are faced and options chosen. The images of the tarot deck reflect the stages and the challenges of this journey. To the uninitiated, the tarot cards are just pictures. To the trained reader, they are a language. The reader is the translator, the intermediary who tells the querents, as those seeking the reading are called, what their cards mean. Tarot reading is a very personal business. There's no such thing as a right and wrong way to read the cards, and readers vary widely in both style and method. But the principle of a tarot reading is always the same. The reader, or sometimes the querent, shuffles the cards, and the reader lays them out according to one of a number of set patterns, known as spreads. Then the reader interprets the cards and addresses the querent's particular concerns. People seek a reading in order to focus for a while on their life, to to reflect on their personal situation.
They want to know, am I on the right track? Am I making the right decisions? Or other times it's very much about, why am I making the wrong decisions? And the good readings, when people come in and they have got a lot of mess and they are making the wrong decisions, but what's good about those readings is that they're prepared to try and work out, to take that responsibility. What am I doing wrong? Is this a pattern? Am I working through something? You know, how can I best alter my approach to make the best out of what's happening around me?
Whatever the querent's motive, there's no point in trying to conceal it. To a skilled reader, the cards reveal everything.
I do a very basic Celtic cross, so for me I put 2 cards down in a cross shape. Now for me, 9 times out of 10, with those 2 cards, I have got exactly the situation why they've come for a reading.
Most readers agree that the cards are like a code, and the reader the code breaker. The pictures on the cards are ancient mystical symbols. Parapsychologist Susan Blackmore believes that they trigger responses on both conscious and unconscious levels.
All these things speak of experiences in people's lives. And so it's not surprising that when you look at these pictures, they inspire emotions, recognition, nostalgia. All of these things come pouring up in response to the cards, just because they are common, human, basic experiences.
Tarot readers are trained to identify every level of meaning in the images. Learning to read tarot requires dedication and practice. Bob Place finds that the best readers combine knowledge of the cards with intuition.
To read tarot cards is a talent, but you can learn. I believe that all a talent is an aptitude. So some people have more aptitude than others, just like for art. Anyone can learn to draw, but not everyone is going to draw like Leonardo da Vinci. You must learn about the symbols and the wisdom tradition behind the symbols and what the symbols mean. But then you must make the leap of faith. You must make the intuitive decision, and that intuition, which is just basically looking at the pictures and telling a story.
Learning all the imagery of the tarot would be quite a challenge. Each deck is different, and the meanings assigned by the deck's creators can vary considerably. There's no such thing as one definitive tarot deck. There are literally hundreds to choose from. It doesn't matter which deck is used. As long as the reader thoroughly understands the deck's symbols, the outcome should be the same. Most readers settle with 1 or 2 personal favorites. With constant use, the deck's images become so internalized that the readers are hardly aware of the code-breaking process. The basic structure of all tarot decks is the same. There are 78 cards made up of 2 parts, or arcana, from the Latin word for secret, the major arcana and the minor arcana. The 56 minor arcana cards are the forerunners of our modern playing cards, and like them are divided into 4 suits. The major arcana looks quite different. They are all picture cards full of complex images. They represent archetypes, the universal symbols which psychologists believe are present in the collective subconscious. Tarot readers see the cards as typifying the challenges we all meet in real life. Only the Fool card stands apart. Unlike the other major arcana cards, he doesn't have a number. He's not a fool in a modern sense, rather an open-minded innocent, eager to learn. In the tarot, he represents us, the human traveler through life.
The Fool I see as like the original. It's the 0 card. It's no beginning, no end. And it's just that spontaneous burst of energy, which has no moral, no anything. It's neither good nor bad. It just is.
Many tarot readers are helped to understand the tarot by seeing it as the story of the Fool's journey through the major arcana. The remaining cards are numbered 1 to 21, and they can be seen in order as staging posts through which the Fool passes on his allegorical journey from birth to enlightenment. The cards would never fall in this order during a reading. Indeed, the Fool card is no more likely to appear in a reading than any other. but following the Fool on this metaphorical journey makes the meanings and associations of each card become clear. As the Fool begins his quest, he meets the first card, numbered 1, the Magician.
The magician is the intellect, it's the academic side, the knowledge, the brain, the power, the mind. And that the magician is always shown pointing to heaven and pointing to earth. The idea is you act as a lightning conductor for energy.
The magician is a creator. He symbolizes the Fool's birth, his spark into life, his vital energies. From him, the Fool learns to create new opportunities and ideas. When the Magician card appears in a reading, it means that the querent must be ingenious and creative in dealing with his problems. Sometimes, a card is dealt upside down. This reversal alters its meaning, usually to an extreme form of the card's face qualities. If the Magician, for example, is dealt reversed, it suggests cunning, trickery, or outright deception. Almost as important as the face meaning of the card is the place where it appears in the spread, its position. In the most simple spreads, the position determines what point in time the card refers to.
When you do a 3-card spread, you get the client to shuffle the cards, and then you slap them into 3 piles. And I take it that the left-hand pile represents the past, the middle pile is the present situation, and the third, obviously, how it's progressing into the future. If you need more clarification on the spread, you literally just take from the relevant pile with each card to sort of elucidate what past influence is. And again, they're usually very immediate readings.
For some readers, the position of a card in the larger spreads also determines which aspect of the querent's life the card is describing.
There's a money position, there's a romance position, there's father and mother and marriage, and there's travel, and there's, you know, your career. So there's all these positions, and as the cards come up, you limit them to their position, and that gives you a much more precise reading, in my opinion.
Watching tarot readers interpreting their cards, it's easy to imagine this ancient art being handed down from the earliest civilizations. But the history of the tarot is blurred and unclear. It's almost as mysterious as the images themselves. The mystical symbols so common on the tarot cards suggest a connection to the ancient civilizations of the East. 19th century admirers of the tarot assumed that the cards had originated there and filtered into Europe with the first trade and travel contacts between East and West. Another popular theory was that they were brought back by crusaders fighting the Saracens in the Holy Land. Much of the mathematics, astrology, and alchemy then flourishing in the East did indeed travel this route. But the tarot cards didn't appear in Europe until 2 centuries after the last crusaders had returned. How then did the tarot arrive in the West? Professor Michael Dummett, an expert on the history of cards, is convinced that they did not come from the East at all.
It's quite certain that tarot cards originated in northern Italy in the early 15th century. The earliest actual documentary reference to them is from 1442, from the account books of the court of Ferrara. But I think they were probably invented about 2 decades earlier, sometime in the 1420s.
But these cards weren't used to reveal the future. The tarot then was a mere card game. The oldest tarot cards still in existence were painted by an unknown artist for the Italian Visconti family around 1450, when playing the tarot game was a fad of the wealthy. Nobles competed to commission the finest hand-painted decks. The Visconti family even included a portrait of a relative in their deck. Sister Manfreda was a model for their version of the High Priestess, the second card of the major arcana and the next stage of the Fool's journey. The High Priestess is the Fool's spiritual mother. Her book represents all the knowledge which the Fool must acquire on his journey. When the High Priestess card appears in a reading, it may represent the querent's secret lover or an unknown admirer. The parlor game of the Renaissance aristocrats was just the beginning of the tarot story. Gradually, the appeal of the game widened. The cards were simplified, copied, and eventually printed. One of the first decks to become popular was the Marseille, which is still considered a classic. It isn't clear at what point the tarot deck went from popular card game to a system of divination, but the step from playing cards to fortune-telling is a small one. How often in a game of chance do players think that fate has dealt them a bad hand? Chance can rapidly become destiny. At some point in the 3 centuries after their birth, that leap was made with the tarot, and it became more than a pack of playing cards. Gradually, each card acquired a meaning, which for the minor arcana cards closely mirrors the structure of medieval society. The wands, representing the peasants, have taken on the meaning of work and enterprise. The coins, representing the merchants, are now associated with business and finance. The cups, representing the church, now relate to all spiritual matters, including affairs of the heart. And the swords, representing the military class, have taken on the meaning of conflict, tensions, and difficulties. Each card within the suit has also acquired a special meaning. For instance, the 9 of Swords implies paranoia and conflict, while the 7 of Swords represents a severing, either emotional, like a divorce, or physical, like a broken leg.
One woman, I got sword cards in her past, the Knight of Swords, 5 of Swords, all this conflict, fighting and tension, and it was coming up with the 10 of Cups in a family. And I just went into it saying, oh my God, you poor girl, what you've been through, the stress, the battles, everything. And it was like warfare. And she said, yes, I'm from Bosnia.
The Gypsies, nomadic people who moved across Europe and parts of Asia, are sometimes credited with first realizing the fortune-telling possibilities of the tarot. They were known to be card players and gamblers, but they were also experts in mysticism and magic. In previous centuries, it was the gypsies to whom Europeans turned to have their future told, with questions about health, happiness, marriage, and love. In just this way, many people now turn to tarot readers, and their questions are still the same.
Quite often someone will come to me, and often a question that a young woman will have is, should I marry George or Tom or Dick or Harry? And I will proceed to shuffle the cards as she concentrates on her question. And when she has it firm in her mind, we will cut the cards, and then she will put the cards back in the order that she wants them in. Then we will read. The first card covers the question. She has the Chariot here, which is like a protective influence of family all around her. We are crossing the question with the 8 of Pentacles, which can be an opposing force or it can be a helpful force. But this shows an educational or working experience. So maybe she met George at work. Then this shows that it was a very exciting, promising event because we have the Wheel of Fortune at the bottom. It's possible that George has been married in the past. We have a 7 of Cups here. And she's been wishing and hoping to meet someone for quite a while, too. And up above, we have the Lovers, which seems very appropriate that she's looking for love and they'd like to marry. And she's asking, is he the right one? It's looking really promising because we have the 2 of Cups in the future, which is reciprocal love. It's all looking very favorable at the moment. We have the Sun down here in her House of Fears, which is a light coming out and dispelling all the fears that she might have. We have the Star of Destiny. I mean, this is a destined situation. And here we have the King of Wands. Now, it could be that George has a very fiery nature. And the final answer, oops, we have another man showing up. So, as the Lovers can indicate a choice between 2, and she may have only met the first man, so that she'll end up having to choose. But it's all a part of her destiny.
For the Fool on his journey, Destiny has not begun to take a hand. He has only just started to learn about himself as he moves through the major arcana. The Emperor and Empress are the next two cards he meets. They represent the security and guidance of parents. When the Empress card appears in a reading, it suggests a happy and mature relationship, sometimes even pregnancy. When the Emperor appears, it shows the need for wisdom and leadership, law and order. Divination from any deck of cards depends on one central belief, that the fall of the cards can be more than a random event. There are so many possible combinations of the tarot cards that the chances of them falling the same way twice are minute, 1 in many millions. And tarot readers believe that the cards that turn up are no accident.
I've been asked this question by quite a few of my clients at the end of their reading. If we picked these up and started over, what would we get, you know? But I find in my experiences of teaching, and when you do just a 10-card spread, which you could do 2 or 3 times, that I've had the same card come up as an answer 2 out of 3 times. I've had the same cards come up in a spread in slightly different positions, or cards with very similar meanings come up.
Tarot readers agree that the shuffle of the cards upon which the deal depends is the most important point in the process. Many readers are certain that the hands of the shuffler are influenced by subconscious energies, but they disagree about who should shuffle the cards. Bob Place always shuffles himself.
When I am shuffling, the small motor muscles, in my hands are controlling where the cards are going, and I'm unconsciously ordering the cards. When I'm done shuffling the cards, my hands stop. They don't want to shuffle anymore. Obviously, I could force them to shuffle, but I don't need to force them. I know it's time, and I stop, and then I let the person make the final cut, and the cards come out, and it works.
Other readers insist that the querent takes part in the shuffling process.
The main reason I think that you do get the client to mix the cards is that so they do have some personal interaction in what comes up. Because I always remember one client in particular who came to see me and who was expecting a clairvoyant. And she was quite shocked at the thought that she had to shuffle cards, and she was quite insistent. She didn't want to mix them. She wanted no responsibility. She just wanted to be told what was going to happen. She felt she didn't want to influence anything. And it was then that I thought, mix the cards. And it was quite an experience for her because she found that there was nothing to be scared of. So I make them mix the cards thoroughly, put them into 4, 5 or 6 piles. Then I make them take the top card of each pile, turn it around, and then I get them to mix them back again. And the whole process means that they are thoroughly mixed into those cards and they can't deny it.
The shuffle is considered so important that readers sometimes prepare for it by building concentration through rituals, such as unwrapping the cards, playing music, or lighting candles.
When I begin to shuffle the cards, I'm a voluntary clairvoyant, and when I begin to shuffle the tarot cards, that's the signal to my unconscious to get ready to be psychic, to open up, to go in a slightly altered place, which is like a meditative state.
The ritual of the tarot is echoed in the next card of the Fool's Journey, the Hierophant, also known as the Pope. He represents the Fool's spiritual father. From him, the Fool learns humility and compassion. When the Pope card appears in a reading, it can signify someone who is greatly respected by the querent. Real-life popes have taken an unfavorable view of the tarot. The 15th and 16th century church suppressed any suggestion of a power not ratified by Christianity. Declared dangerous and heretical, tarot cards were banned and systematically burnt wherever they were found. The tarot went underground. It was to remain hidden for some 200 years until a chance meeting propelled it once more out of obscurity. In the late 1770s, a French clergyman called Antoine Cour de Gébelin came upon some travelers playing cards. He was intrigued and delighted by their deck. He had never seen such strange and fascinating images on a pack of cards. The travelers told him that they believed their cards to have come from Egypt. This struck an immediate chord with Gébelin. was already interested in new evidence that the ancient Egyptians had been masters of magic and ritual.
Antoine Courtegeblin, 1781, he published 8 volumes dealing with esoteric material, including a chapter called Le Jeu du Tarot in Le Monde Primitif. And he had the idea that the Egyptian temples and the libraries, which were destroyed in Egypt, were now really a reincarnation in the tarot cards. And here were the 78 pages from those libraries that you could see if you looked at every one of the tarot cards.
Gébelin began working on the cards, deciphering their meaning, and claiming in his book that the cards came from a lost Egyptian magical handbook, the Book of Thoth. The Egyptian connection was a potent one. There is even a Book of Thoth deck, but Gébelin's conclusions may have been hasty.
Many of the tarot readers talk about the Book of Thoth, this supposedly mystical book that has a lot of power in it and gives you information about things that you're not supposed to know. There are books that had occult powers, that had magical powers for the Egyptians. But a specific Book of Thoth, we don't have.
Whether Gébelin was right or wrong, his book was extremely influential.
Within 2 years of the publication of Cote de Gébelin's theories, a man called Aliette, who reversed his name to Eteia, and had various occupations, but in the past he had been a professional fortune teller, and he became one again, only this time using the tarot pack.
Eteia became the first of the successful society tarot readers and set about giving the cards new meanings and devising new spreads. The spread he is best known for is the Great Figure of Destiny. One of the largest spreads ever devised, it is still in use. The spread involves shuffling and laying out all 78 cards of the deck. As with every spread, position determines the relevance of the cards. Cards on the right-hand side of the spread refer to the querent's past. The Lover's card is the 6th of the Fool's symbolic journey through the major arcana. It's about decisions. The Fool learns that he must choose between the golden-haired woman, who represents the sensible choice, and a dark-haired woman who represents the sensual. The Fool must either follow his head or his heart. When the Lover's card appears in a reading, it's a warning to make choices wisely, because there are far-reaching consequences.
Years ago, this girl came to me for a reading, and she had 2 men in her life. And during the course of the reading, I described these 2 men to her. But I said, you know this Aquarian stockbroker that you're seeing? He's married. Did you know that? She said, I thought he was divorced. And I said, no, he's separated, but he's married. He hasn't started a divorce proceeding, and he's not about to start a divorce proceeding. He also has 2 children. Did he tell you that? She said, no, he didn't tell me that. And I said, and he has no intentions of getting married or settling down. And he's actually been clipped so that he can't have any more children. And this girl was like around 30, and he was in his 40s. And I said, so if you want to get married and have a family, which your cards indicate to me is what you're looking for, this other man is a far better choice because you can have children with him.
Here, in the Great Figure of Destiny, the Lover's card refers to decisions in the past. The querent's present life is shown in the uppermost cards in the spread. The Chariot card is the one the Fool meets at the 7th stage of his journey. It's one of the most turbulent cards of the tarot, with 2 beasts pulling in different directions. The Fool feels the inner turmoil of opposing desires. He cannot progress until his own conflicts are resolved. Readers are never surprised to find the Chariot in a spread, since it indicates the kind of tensions that would typically prompt the querent to seek a reading. On the left of the Figure of Destiny lie the cards which point to the future. Justice is the 8th card of the Fool's journey. It suggests solutions for his dilemmas. He learns the value of wisdom, reason, and considered argument. When justice appears in a spread, it can indicate legal solutions, which may not be as straightforward as they seem.
For instance, one guy I did a reading for, he was going through a really messy divorce, really messy, and I just kept feeling, I couldn't quite work out why, but I kept saying, you've got to really keep your present relationship under wraps. You know, don't let your wife know, she'll use that as ammunition. And it felt, I don't know why, I kept feeling like telling him, just be really, really careful. And he was really being very evasive, and I thought, he's not going to tell me anything, but he just needs to be warned. And I felt like I was going on automatic. I couldn't, my mouth kept saying, just be careful, be careful. And when he came to the end of the reading, he said, oh, could I just ask a question about the new relationship? And I thought, fine. He took 3 cards, and I thought, oh, that's why. It was the Emperor card there with the Ace of Cups. Like, he was basically having an affair with his male boss, and at the moment he was going through a divorce, and I just thought, well, if his present wife got to know that he'd actually run off with another guy, she'd take him to the cleaners.
As Eteia was refining the great figure of destiny, the popularity of the tarot was growing. The renowned tarot reader, Mademoiselle Lenormand, was building up her Parisian clientele and had even made friends at the palace. She had read for Empress Josephine and had even predicted her marriage to Napoleon. Josephine was so impressed that she decided to learn the secrets of the tarot. But rather than read the cards for others, Josephine wished only to read the cards for herself. Although experienced tarot readers do read their own cards, they generally advise against it for beginners. Sometimes the cards can look alarming, and it takes experience to make a considered analysis. For those who know the tarot well, the peace and quiet of a solitary reading has its appeal. When the fool meets the hermit, the eternal seeker after truth, he learns the value of solitary reflection. His appearance in a spread suggests that the querent needs to take time to stop and think. Tarot readers find that there are times when they too must pause and consider, when they see bad news in the cards.
Well, someone once came to see me, and it was the only time where I'd say I saw death in the cards. The first card was a reversed tower card, which is chaos from chaos. It's worse, it's like never-ending, it's unresolvable chaos. And then the Ten of Swords, which obviously implied some sort of feeling from him that something had struck him from nowhere, that he had no control over. And I thought, well, I looked at him and thought, well, he doesn't look well, but does he know that? I thought, well, I'll get some backup. I put more cards down, but it was even more awful. As I was sort of going into that, I mean, he started saying, oh, I'm very, very ill at the moment. You know, I have AIDS. And it was almost like, well, at least we can start the reading now.
Fortunately, readings are usually less traumatic. For most people, it is a mixture of good and bad news, as the fool discovers at the next stage of his journey when he meets the Wheel of Fortune. He learns that everyone encounters changes in circumstances. It's no good blaming misfortune on fate. It's more important to make the best of what can't be changed. The wheel means movement. For the fool's tarot journey from birth to enlightenment, it's the halfway mark. Now he faces his greatest challenge. The next cards take him into the underworld, where he will meet the darkest and the most sinister cards of the tarot. Towards the end of the 19th century, there was a revival of mysticism among the intellectuals of Europe. Magic, alchemy, Eastern religion, the Kabbalah, the ancient tomes were all dusted off. In London, leading figures such as the poet W.B. Yeats were attracted to secret societies such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded by the occultist MacGregor Mathers. Members embraced the rituals of high magic. Yeats wrote, "Mysticism is all that I do, all that I think, all that I write." The new mystics were enchanted. But as the fool soon realizes, enchantment can be dangerous. The enchantress, whom the fool meets next on his journey, represents a powerful force. Indeed, the card is often known as strength. Her personal charm is considerable, and the fool learns that self-discipline is vital. In a tarot reading, the card sounds a warning, a call to self-control and restraint, qualities which later proved to be lacking in some members of the Golden Dawn movement. As they continued their studies, the Golden Dawn scholars realized that the most potent symbols of the ancient mystical systems had been unified in the tarot. There were parallels between the tarot journey, the tree of life of the Kabbalah, and the alchemical path to the philosopher's stone. They set out to refine and explain the tarot, and to bring together all their ideas in a new and even more powerful deck.
We know about the order today thanks to Pamela Coleman Smith. She was an artist that worked with Arthur Edward Waite to produce what was called the rectified tarot deck. She was known as Pixie to her friends. Around 1903, she joined the Secret Order of the Golden Dawn, and she began to paint visions that came to her while listening to music by Beethoven, Bach, Chopin, Debussy. In 1909, she undertook for a very small payment to do a series of 78 cards known as the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. It was a big job, but very little pay. Were it not for this particular deck, Pamela would not be known today. Instead, there are millions of her decks sold, and she's become very well known. What Pamela did was she actually had a picture on every pip card. For example, the Ten of Swords has a man lying flat with 10 swords into his body, showing how a disaster is going to occur. That's a much easier card to read than to just see 10 crossed swords, as it was done in the Tarot Marseille deck.
But even as the famous deck was being created, the idealism which marked the birth of the Golden Dawn was fading. By 1905, the founders had deep differences about the interpretation of mysticism. The 12th card on the Fool's Journey, the Hanged Man, is about just this sort of disillusionment. It teaches the fool to question values and search for new solutions when things no longer make sense. When the Hanged Man appears in a reading, it suggests that sacrifices may be needed, and that the querent must try looking at the world from a new angle. There was new thinking at the Order of the Golden Dawn, but it proved misguided. The intellectual curiosity of the early days turned into an obsession with the occult. The fool, too, is going through the darkest part of his journey to enlightenment. He meets the 13th card in the Major Arcana, Death. This skeletal image strikes horror, but in the tarot journey, death doesn't mean the end, only change. The fool learns not to be frightened by change, but to embrace the challenge of a new order. Querents fear seeing the death card in their spread, but it seldom means physical death. It usually signals a new direction, a new job, or partnership. With death behind him, the fool encounters the 14th card, Temperance, representing the balance of heart and mind, which he needs to thread his way through the temptations of the underworld. Reversed, the Temperance card takes on a special meaning for business. It suggests conflicts of interest. Lily Gain was once consulted by a businessman who was being swindled by his partner.
Yeah, I've actually had a guy who came in and I did readings for him, and it's quite clear that his business partnership was really needed to be dissolved. It seemed like the guy was the accountant, King of Pentacles reversed a lot. The guy was basically swallowing up the money. And really it just felt that independence, he kept coming through as the magician, he needed to be as independent as possible in his business. And I was trying to do cards on it, and I kept thinking, he's got some funny ideas. I said, there is an orthodox way you can do this, you know. You don't have to sort of be dirty or do fiddles or anything. He said, you can just get rid of this guy. And then at that point, he took the tape off and said, that's why I'm here. I need to know, how far can I get away with being really evil? Basically, he was planning to bump the guy off. And he wanted to know if he'd get away with murdering him.
The darker side of human nature emerged in the history of the tarot with a member of the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, creator of the Book of Thoth tarot deck. The deck reflected his interests in dark forces and his preoccupation with the devil. The devil card is a new challenge in the Fool's metaphorical journey. It represents enslavement to evil. The Fool comes to realize that we all have a darker side, which we must overcome. When the devil card appears in a reading, it indicates danger and threat.
Years ago, I read for a Playboy bunny who happened to be a friend of actress Sharon Tate. And a month before the Tate murders, I read for her, and she got the devil and the tower and the 9 of swords and the 10 of swords. And I began to tune into them, and I said, there's going to be a murder, and it's going to involve more than one person, and there is something satanic about it, and there's drugs, and there's alcohol, there's guns and knives, and I started feeling sick to my stomach. And I said, I can't talk about this anymore because it's making me ill.
There is one further test for the Fool if he is to reach fulfillment. The next card he meets is the Tower of Destruction. It represents the shattering of old illusions, a period of momentous change. The Fool is forced to seek new philosophies upon which to rebuild. In readings, the Tower can point to disaster, distress, and financial ruin. Strengthened by his trials, the Fool emerges from the dark part of his journey. At last, he sees a glimmer of hope with the next card in the major arcana, the Star. In a reading, the appearance of the Star card suggests altered prospects, new opportunities, a new start. For the Tarot, too, a fresh start is on the way. For the first time in its history, the Tarot reached across the Atlantic. In the 60s, the life-enhancing aspects of Eastern mysticism rose to popularity on a wave of peace and love. The spirit of the age brought with it a renewed interest in lost and forgotten arts, including the tarot. Stuart Kaplan was on a trip to Europe when he first came across the tarot pack.
I went there and found a tarot deck. I had no idea what it was. It seemed interesting. I brought it back. I went to a store in New York City. They bought 100 copies, and in the first year, I sold 200,000 copies of the 1JJ tarot deck.
Since then, Kaplan has sold millions of cards. He has commissioned dozens of new decks, each one retaining the powerful symbolism of the traditional cards. One of the most familiar of all the ancient images in the tarot is the moon, the next card of the Fool's journey. The moon is the card of intuition. Contemplating it, the Fool discovers the sensitive side of his nature. In a reading, the moon card represents dreams and inspiration. Many tarot readers recommend quiet contemplation of the cards.
I think the positive value of tarot cards lies in how you can help yourself to understand yourself by looking at those pictures. I mean, the really striking cards, some of the major arcana, really can be looked into for a long, long time. I mean, you can use them to meditate.
Meditators often choose positive cards, and one of the most uplifting is the Sun. When the Fool meets this, the brightest card in his journey, he gains optimism and joy. In a reading, the card is equally positive, suggesting contentment, a happy marriage, and a successful outcome for plans and business ventures. The positive emphasis which the 60s brought to mysticism has given a new slant to the tarot. Now tarot readers regard the cards as a healing resource, an aid in counseling and therapy. They see the readings as offering help.
The reason people come back once they've had a reading from me is they've found that the readings are healing. They're not just telling them what's happening in their life, what's likely to happen in the future, but they're empowering them, they're healing them, they're helping them understand why it's happening, what things they need to let go of, what things they need to embrace to be able to go on with their lives.
The Fool is nearing the end of his journey through the major arcana. As he approaches his goal, he encounters the Judgment card. It's a day of reckoning, but it offers the chance of redemption. In a reading, the Judgment card indicates an opportunity for assessment or a time of testing. The tarot has had its share of testing, too. Parapsychologist Sue Blackmore, fascinated by the accuracy of her tarot readings, decided to see if there really was magic in the cards.
I had 10 people and an assistant. I asked the assistant to get each of the 10 people to sit down with her and shuffle the cards and lay them out in exactly the way I would normally do. She would then just take the cards from them, write down the top 10 cards, and make a list of all those card orders and give it to me, coded so I didn't know which was which. I then sat down, imagined the person was in front of me, went through all the shuffling and laying out again, but laid out the ones she told me, and did a reading on that basis, and I wrote down all the 10 readings. And then gave all the 10 readings written down back to the 10 people and asked them if they could pick their own. Well, if tarot works in the way that it's usually claimed, that is, it really does relate to the person who's shuffled the cards, then they ought to be able to have picked their own much more often than you'd expect by chance. And they couldn't.
But Sue Blackmore's tests were not conducted in the same way as a normal tarot reading.
The big difference is I was not sitting there looking at the person. And that, to my mind, is what you need. You need to be there with the person, getting the feedback, having all the psychological communication. What's really going on in a tarot reading is not directly to do with the cards. The cards are more facilitators, if you like. What's really going on is between the people. It's psychology, it's not magic.
Many people believe that a successful tarot reading is dependent simply on the reader's psychological skill.
What it may be is simply as a psychological crutch for the reader. That is, the cards don't have the magic. It's, in a sense, the reader that has the magic. He's got all kinds of information in his brain. He sees people. He can size them up. He can tell what kind of person they are. He can tell if he's nervous, if he's this. He can tell if he might be successful, if he's a winner or a loser.
But most tarot readers would disagree with this view. Their experience tells them that it's the cards that determine the reading.
When I first started doing readings, it was the one thing that used to freak me out. I knew when I did my own cards, the cards were very relevant. And when I did people that I knew. But then when you do people you know, you think, well, is it just because I know them that I'm making that sense? I know the situation in their life. But when you've done hundreds of total strangers and you're just going by the cards, and it's always particularly relevant to them, I don't know.
There's a consensus that even given the accuracy of the cards, the sensitivity of the reader is crucial.
It's like a mirror reflection of what you're thinking, what you would like to think, or what vibrations you're picking up. And the cards allow you, the catalyst, to relate that in a verbal story. It's a visual image that you can verbalize.
At last, the Fool has reached the end of his travels. He meets the World card, symbolizing completion, self-fulfillment, and true enlightenment. The Fool has reached his goal. He's learned from all the stages of his journey and passed every test. In a reading, the World is a wholly positive card suggesting happiness and resolution. It symbolizes full knowledge and, finally, comprehension. Complete understanding of how the tarot works still eludes both querents and readers. They're no closer to explaining the power of tarot readings than they were 200 years ago.
They work. I've seen them work. I don't know why they work. What probably appeals to me most is that they're as mysterious as the cards themselves. Why it happens, why I can do a reading, why the readings make sense. I don't understand it. Most people don't understand it. But the people who do it find that it works. It's enough intuitive nature in the cards and the allegorical imagery that can combine to form a story.
We're still at a loss to explain the peculiar magic of the tarot. It remains a mysterious tool which somehow unlocks thoughts and emotions and foreshadows the future. But for those who use the tarot and live with it, there's no denying it. It's all in the cards.